Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to share with you our amazing Soulfire retreat, Evolve in Bali, Indonesia, that happens this April between the 22nd and the 28th. If your soul has been begging you for a life-changing experience, and you're ready to immerse yourself in a culture that is so deeply sacred and spiritual while being surrounded by incredible beauty, where your five senses are literally taken over and you have no other option but to be present and to savor every precious moment, then this retreat is for you. This retreat is for you if you are ready to push the edges of possibility and expand into new ways of being. This isn't just a luxury getaway with your favorite girlfriends. What's waiting for you in Bali is a life shift where the path forward becomes the turning point in the road toward the life you have been imagining, where anything is possible. Come evolve with us. Your soul is begging you. Head on over to soulfireretreats.org and book your spot today. We still have rooms available through most of the different room types, including our cheapest option at the twin bed level, but there's only one left for that price. So please join us today. And if you're interested in checking out the agenda that we have planned for this incredible week, then head over to my Instagram account at Carissa Step and take a look at the pinned post where I've shared it there. All of these activities are included, including a massage, a one-on-one personal healing session with a local Balinese healer, and so much more. I look forward to connecting with you soon. Now let's get to today's episode. Welcome to the Stepping into Meaningful Relationships podcast. I'm your host, Carissa Step. I'm a relationship and human design coach, and this podcast is designed to help you create a stronger connection to yourself so you can transform the relationships around you, whether that be with your partner, a friend, a parent, a child, or your business. We will be looking at relationships through the lens of human design, and my guests and I will bring you the tools, tips, and tricks to create deeply meaningful connections with others. But first, let's start with you. The most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's get to today's episode. Hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Stepping into Meaningful Relationships. I'm your host, Carissa Step, and this is the podcast for you if you are looking to improve your most important relationship, which is the relationship with yourself, so that you can more meaningfully and intimately connect with others around you. I am going to be sharing with you today some intuitive guidance for you as you head into December of 2023. And also, I'm going to be sharing some messages about perhaps maybe what you've experienced this year in 2023 and what you can expect as we head into a new year in 2024. Now, for some of you that may not know, I am someone who identifies as an intuitive. Now, that's not to say that I'm special or unique in any way, because I am not special or unique in any way. I believe we are all naturally intuitive. And the only difference is that some of us have had a little bit more practice or have learned how to access our intuition and the various ways in which it speaks to us. For me personally, I have some mediumship skills, right? Which means that I'm able to connect with people who have passed. I experience my intuition through all different senses. So I hear things, sometimes I see things. And when I say I see things, it's not that I see them as if they were right in front of me, like if you were standing before me right now in person. I mean, it's in my mind's eye, right? It's like on the movie screen of the inside of my mind where I see things. I will sometimes get certain smells or scents. Other times I might taste things in my mouth. So it's interesting sometimes if I'm doing a mediumship reading and I have someone who has passed who used to be, say, someone who really loved potato chips or something like really salty. I'll get that taste in my mouth, like popcorn or something like that. And so that would be a way in which sometimes people who have passed will use as a way to identify who they are so that the person that I'm reading for makes the connection that, oh, yes, that's my Uncle Charlie or something like that. I also feel things. I get sensations in my body. So I might get chills, or I might actually experience some sort of pressure or something that's uncomfortable within my body that will alert me to let me know that either I'm on track or there's something off, or perhaps someone that I'm reading for might be experiencing maybe something that they're struggling with. If they're struggling to use their voice, right? They're feeling like they can't speak their truth for some reason. I might feel like someone's like literally strangling me. Because obviously, if someone's strangling you, they are cutting off your circulation, right? They're cutting off your airways, and you're unable to then scream or speak or cry or anything. So anyway, so those are just some of the ways in which my intuition speaks to me. And it's interesting because although I'm going to get into the intuitive messages in a second, the reason why I want to say we're all intuitive, we just may not always know how to access our intuition or how our intuition speaks to us, is because I remember having two very distinct experiences, one as a child, one in my early 20s, that freaked me out because I had no idea that I had these capabilities. So the first example is I was about, I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. So like in third or fourth grade. My grandfather had passed away. And he was the first person that was close to me that passed away. Now, we didn't have a super close relationship because I was actually a lot closer to my mother's parents than I were to my dad's parents. And this was my dad's dad that had passed away. But I remember being in my childhood home and he had just passed, and I was in the kitchen and I happened to peek out of the kitchen and look down the hallway, which if I look down the hallway, I'd first see our foyer. I might be able to see a little bit of our like formal living room. I might be able to see a little bit into like the family room, and then the hallway to my parents' bedroom. And I remember distinctly seeing him standing in the doorway of the hallway to my parents' bedroom. And I freaked out. I was like, I never want to see that again. Please don't do that. That's really scary. I don't want to see you. I'm glad you're okay, but like, I'm done. And I believe that it was at that point that I literally shut down my ability, whether it was full sight or it was just more of like seeing it in my mind's eye, because I had a very similar experience at the Transcend retreat where the house we were in was haunted and I saw a woman kind of walk by. And again, like I didn't necessarily see her physically with my eyes, but I saw her image flash before my inner mind. And when I was describing her to somebody else that was at the retreat, she also saw the same exact thing. So we were kind of like throwing out details at the same time. And I was like, yes. And she was like, yes. Every time we were going back and forth on some like descriptive adjective or defining characteristic of this woman that we were seeing. So anyway, that was the first experience that I had. And the second experience that I had was I actually worked downtown in Manhattan, and I happened to be working on the day of September 11th, right? So I literally worked at the very tip of Manhattan in a building called One New York Plaza. I was working for a firm called Goldman Sachs. It is a international investment bank, an investment firm. And I was traveling on the subway once the subways had reopened. This was probably like, I want to say it was like 3 weeks to maybe a little under a month right after 9/11. And maybe I'll share my story about what I experienced that day if anyone's interested in hearing it on another episode. Um, but I remember being on the subway and there was this couple that was sitting, and I happened to be standing holding onto the railing across from them. But I happened to see them in the reflection, as we're going through the tunnel. You can see, through the reflection on the glass, the people that are kind of behind you. So for whatever reason, I decided to kind of turn around and look at them. And I heard this voice in my head and felt this presence. And again, like I could kind of make out the features of who this person was that was talking, but it was really weird to me and I was very uncomfortable with it. But it was this younger gentleman who was older than me, but was quite young. I think he was like in his late 20s, who said to me, please tell them that I'm okay. Please tell them that I wasn't in pain. And my whole body got chills. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like I need to say something. I need to tell them because they looked so distraught sitting on the subway. And it had seemed to me that they had just been down to that part of the city, like downtown Manhattan, where I was coming from, right? We were all heading uptown because I was going to Penn Station to get my train out to Long Island at the time where I was living. And I didn't, but I was like, I felt this like anxiety and this pressure, like, no, you need to tell them, you need to tell them, they need to know. But I was so afraid that they were going to look at me like I was absolutely crazy that I decided not to say anything. And I felt really bad after. And it was one of those things where eventually I had to let it go and make peace with it. But that was the second time that I had an experience like that. Now, fast forward into my early 40s, I had been experiencing this big sense of loss. I had a dear friend of mine who was also in her very, very early 40s who passed away from metastatic breast cancer, leaving behind two very small young children. And it sent me into this dizzying journey, I would say, of self-discovery because it was almost like, okay, she lived such a full and meaningful life. And witnessing all the people that came together during the time while she was sick, and then even in the funeral home at her wake, seeing all of these people who loved her dearly and had all of these amazing memories of her and with her made me realize, like, wait a second, like, what am I doing with my life? Right? Like, who would be there for me? Like, have I established those types of connections with people? And am I living life to the fullest? And am I happy? Like, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be happy? Would I be okay? Is this all there is? And it really kind of set me down this rabbit hole of asking 1,001 questions. I realized at the time that I was not happy. I was deeply unhappy, but I couldn't understand why. And so I had, in my search for answers, a month or two later, I had booked a reading with an intuitive. And it was the first time I had ever really done a one-on-one reading with somebody who was supposedly a psychic. And she was someone that I had heard actually on a podcast. The host of that podcast was someone that I held in high esteem. So I figured, okay, why not give this a shot? So I had this reading with this woman. And first of all, it blew my mind. She was able to articulate what I was experiencing, what had been happening in my life, why I was so unhappy, and even started to outline some of the decisions and choices that I needed to make in order to turn things around or to shift and change my life. At the end of the reading, she said two things to me. The first thing she said was, there's this thing called human design. I have no idea what it's all about. I literally only heard about it very recently, but your guides are very insistent that I share this with you because this is a big part of your next part of your journey. And then she said, and there's something else. You are also very intuitive, and your guides really want you to learn how to access your intuition, to trust it, because they have been sending you messages and they want you to know that those messages are coming from them, and you need to trust yourself about what is coming through. And you need to learn how to use your gifts. So, of course, I jumped off that call. The first thing I did was Google human design. I kind of jumped down that rabbit hole first. And then a month or two later, actually, through a human design podcast, I got in touch with somebody who was beginning to offer classes on intuition. And so within that year of that phone call, I became certified as a quantum human design specialist, and I learned how to access my intuitive gifts. Those two things have been so impactful for my life and for the healing and the journey that I have been on since then. So, something that I have been wanting to do is to bring back more of my intuitive gifts into my business, into things that I'm doing, and into this podcast, which I haven't done so much of. If you're on my email list last week, you would have received an email with my intuitive guidance to help you manage some of the things that might have been coming up for you over these next couple of weeks as we are kind of heading into this holiday season. And so I decided, like, you know what? It might be actually kind of cool to do an episode on talking about potentially the journey that you may have been throughout this year in 2023, and then where we're headed in 2024. And then I'm also going to give you more specific messages around the themes and the energies of December specifically. And I feel like this is good timing because this episode will come out on November 28th. So just before we're heading into December. So I'm hoping that this is helpful for you. And if this is something that you guys enjoy and you like listening to, then, please let me know. As always, drop me some feedback and maybe we'll make this like a regular thing. I don't know. So anyway, okay, let's talk a little bit about what came through about the journey that maybe you have been on this year in 2023. It feels like perhaps maybe you started the beginning of this year where you felt a little bit of this dynamic of you against them, right? Whoever them is, right? It was just you against everybody else. That these other people in your life maybe didn't understand you and who you were. And it's been a journey that you've been on throughout this year to move from maybe more of this defended position, right? Or a victim mindset of feeling like, oh, they're never going to understand me. They're never going to get me. Why do they always judge me? Or, why do they always make me feel like I have to explain myself? And perhaps you've sort of moved now as we're entering the end of the year into this new and this different place where you are more empowered, right? Where you're able to walk beside others with compassion and with empathy and with full awareness of your patterns, right? So that you can understand better, maybe where they were coming from at the beginning of this year, right? Or where they are coming from now with more awareness, where you're able to see like, okay, I can understand like why they would feel that way. Or I can see where maybe they are acting out an old pattern based on, some underlying belief that they hold about themselves that's not true. And you're able to look at the people in your life now, as opposed to maybe in the beginning of this year, and see, okay, I know I can see like their truest intentions. I can see their most authentic self beneath the surface. But unfortunately, it seems like perhaps they have been acting from this place of their wounds, right? Where they don't feel safe. And they've only been able to attack me or make me feel like I feel like I was being attacked because I was in that place before where I didn't really understand my past patterns, right? Where maybe you didn't understand, what your limiting beliefs were about yourself. And so as a result, perhaps you started at the beginning of the year with a little bit more tension in some of your relationships. And so maybe there was this idea that like you felt like you had to always be on defense to defend what you thought, how you felt, where you were coming from, all of these things. And now it's like you've almost come full circle where now, because you have done so much work on yourself, because you are no longer the victim, right? You've moved into this empowerment phase where I see how they're now behaving because I was there before, right? Meaning that now they're the ones being defensive. And you can look at them with compassion and say, listen, like, I'm not trying to offend you. I am not trying to trigger you, but I can understand why perhaps maybe you feel like, let's say, you're not important. And as a result of not feeling important, you feel like what I'm saying or what I'm doing is making you feel more of that unimportance, right? If that makes sense. I'm sort of talking in very vague examples. So I'm sorry if you're losing me here. But basically what it is, it's like, because you've only recently been able to open your eyes over this last year, right? During this journey that you've been on, where you've disrupted patterns, where you've learned to self-accept, where perhaps maybe you've freely come to love all the parts of yourself, despite your wounds, and despite the parts that maybe in the past you were masking away out of shame for so long. And you were finally able to feel safe enough to show the world your true, authentic self, that you're able to see that they're like a few steps maybe behind in their journey. And that's okay because we're all on different points along the same path. So it's possible that you felt like you had to justify your position, justify why you are the way that you are, or who you are, or maybe you had to justify what you believed, what you had experienced. But somewhere along the line, you learned to surrender. Somewhere along the line this year, maybe you have been able to take enough of a pause to listen to your inner truth and become grounded in this idea that there is something better available, that there is a bigger, more expansive possibility, that maybe there is a different life waiting for you. And you have had all of these experiences up until this point that were necessary for your growth so that you could get to that next chapter. And maybe throughout the year, you learned how to become curious. In that surrender, sometimes comes peace. And there can be a little bit of feeling like you're sitting in a void. But it's when we're in the void where we begin to get curious. And we begin to eventually set out on a journey of discovery, a journey of understanding. And it was within that journey, perhaps, that you learn to let go of a scarcity mindset or a lack mindset or the idea that you were the victim. And maybe you realize that that abundance and the life that you dreamed of that felt so elusive is no longer elusive. Because what you found is that you were able to be grateful for all of the healing that you've done, all of the deep inner work that you've done. Maybe you've even learned to be grateful for all of the experiences that you've had, even if they've been crappy. And so you learn to transmute that victimhood consciousness into one of abundance, gratitude, empowerment, where you finally feel safe to open your heart and allow yourself to not just give, but receive, and to give abundantly because you found that you have all the resources that you need within you. Perhaps part of your journey in 2023 has been realizing that you are the resource. And that as you self-accepted and loved all the parts of you that perhaps in the past you hid away out of shame, and as you shifted your mindset, you began to feel more confident, more calm, more present. And you're coming to a place where you're able to now see others for who they truly are. And you will have built an awareness of, again, when they have been acting or when they are acting from their deep wounds, and still be able to accept them for where they are at, knowing that you're not better than them, they're not better than you, but we're all on our own path with our own timing, having different experiences, but ultimately all getting to the same place, right? And not that there is a destination in mind, but the point is that collectively, all of our experiences that we are having are happening concurrently at the same time. So even though in this construct of time that we have created as humans, it feels like maybe we are ahead of them on our path and our growth, that really time doesn't really exist. And so we are all deeply connected. We are all experiencing things collectively at the same time. And it feels like as a collective, we are moving into a new world where we are being asked to rely more on our five senses rather than just on our eyes or our mouths to communicate. We're stepping into a time where communication is going to be more full bodied, full sensory. Our emotions and our sensations are going to be able to communicate so much more than what words can intimate. Words are inadequate. So when we can move past the fear and the doubts of the mind and instead feel and sense and allow the information that comes through our bodies, it's going to change the way in which we relate to one another. We're going to allow in information through, I'm going to say all six senses, because we're going to say that intuition is a sixth sense. So when we allow ourselves to take in information in all of these different ways, we can then become curious rather than judgmental. We could become open-minded and open-hearted instead of being closed-minded and cold-hearted, because we are allowing in information, right? When we allow ourselves to receive, we are in a position of vulnerability. And when we're vulnerable, we are more open. That doesn't mean that we're weak, but if we can see past the patterns, we can see through the words, where even our emotions offer us information to better understand first ourselves and then each other. Because right now, our verbal expression of those emotions and our verbal expression in the way in which we communicate is inadequate. Emotions are so much more complex than the words we use to describe them. The words are trivial, they're one-dimensional, they're flat. So this shift will change how we see each other, how we view ourselves, and how we relate to one another. And when we step into our own self-leadership by doing the work to heal our unresolved trauma, to heal our deep inner wounds, we're able to then connect in a different way. And when we can take in all of this information and learn how to process it and experience it, life becomes so much more fulfilling. It becomes more enriching. This way of being and living and thinking and acting gives way to a whole new way of experiencing life without grudges, without that unhealed trauma, without the pain, without the hurt, and instead with more compassion and more love and more empathy and more understanding and more acceptance. So perhaps some of this journey that I'm explaining is not exactly representative of what you've experienced this year. And if it's not, that's fine. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But just know that maybe you're in the middle of this right now. And so maybe part of this is what's going to unfold for you in 2024. If we look at the way the world is today, we can see how much we have created from our unresolved trauma and our childhood wounds. And as we work to recover from our past trauma and heal our deep inner wounds, the world that we co-create is going to be very different. Listening to podcasts like this, where you're trying to do the inner work on yourself, right? Reading books, taking classes, reading articles, and doing the work on yourself is going to have a big impact on the world we create, the life that we experience, and the way in which we relate to others. And your kids will thank you one day. So in the month of December, you're going to be asked to continue to let go of some of these things that you have been releasing, shedding, and letting go of over the last few weeks. There's a reminder here to do that in moderation, right? So allow the shedding to happen, even if it feels a little bit intense at times, but allow yourself to still experience and be present in the joyful moments, right? The moments where you do get to connect with people that maybe you don't get to connect with on a daily basis. You know, the holidays oftentimes brings together friends and loved ones that don't see each other that often. So allowing yourself the time to shed and let go of the things that need to go. And that might happen kind of in the background. It might even happen on a very subtle level where you're not necessarily as aware of it, right? It's not going to feel like you're necessarily gripping on with, a kung fu grip onto these things that you need to let go of, some of which might actually include some relationships in your life. You might see that some of the people that are no longer a good fit for you might very slowly sort of slip away, right? They might tend to pull away naturally on their own without you having to go through some sort of difficult, say, breakup, right? Or having to have a difficult conversation to end that relationship. You might find that the things that are no longer serving you are quietly slipping away, right? Or are releasing and detaching themselves from you in some way. As we're talking about like tying up loose ends here for the year end, this also could look like even shedding and letting go of things in your physical space. This could look like a clearing out of, things maybe in your home or a specific area of your home so that you can feel like you're ready to welcome in some new energy, the new energy of the new year. So this clearing out, this letting go, this releasing that is happening, just know that like some of this might even be just like old stories and old mindsets that need to just go and get released. And it's interesting because I'm recording this right around the full moon, which is all about releasing and letting go of things that are no longer serving you. So take this as your opportunity, if you listen to this close to around the date that this is going to drop, to literally be intentional about what it is you want to let go of. And again, these endings don't have to be dramatic in any way. Take them in stride. Allow whatever needs to go, right? So let it flow out so that whatever is ready to come in can flow in very easily as well. You're making room for new relationships, for new thoughts, for new narratives, for new experiences, for new opportunities that are aligned with who you are now after all of the work that you have done this year. Okay. So stay grounded. Stay grounded actually in your emotions. That was another big theme that kind of came through, which is, you've gotten very good at learning how to feel your emotions, allowing them to flow through you, which is very important. So stay grounded in that, right? Listen to what's coming up. Listen to the emotions that want to be shed and released, allowing yourself to feel what comes up almost as a way of allowing your body to let go of it, right? That's the whole purpose. When we hold on to our emotions, they stagnate and they can cause things eventually like physical illness. They can cause chronic pain. But when we allow ourselves to feel them, then we're able to let them go and release them. So if you think about even with a storm, right? When there's a storm brewing and the clouds are rolling in and the winds are picking up, eventually at some point, it's going to likely start to rain. And what does the rain do? The rain allows everything that has been unsettled by the wind to settle back down and to clear and to cleanse. Even if things have gotten reorganized and shifted around during the storm, the rain comes in to clean it all away, right? To clean it all up. And it's the same thing with when we, for example, allow ourselves to cry. It's allowing us to release those emotions that have been built up and pent up, right? Where the pressure builds and builds and builds and we don't know what else to do. And the only way our body knows how to clear that is by crying and releasing and cleansing with that cry. So allow yourself, if the tears come this month, allow them to come. Again, it doesn't have to be fully dramatic, right? This doesn't have to be you laying on the bathroom floor in the fetal position, blasting sad love songs from the 80s. Okay. But, if you need a few minutes to release some tears, then do it. Maybe it's anger that needs to come through, and that's fine too. It feels like this storm that's coming, that's clearing out, is more of an internal thing than an external thing. And that's why I said, like, if you're letting go of relationships or letting go of certain people in your life, like, that's not going to be very dramatic. It's going to kind of happen in the background. It feels like it's just sort of going to shift it behind the scenes, kind of, right? Like the nature of the relationship is just going to naturally change. And part of that might be because maybe you're getting better at setting boundaries, right? So someone that you had in your inner circle, you're now placing boundaries, and they don't have to be boundaries that are spoken out loud. and verbalized to this other person. It could just be the way in which you have these internal boundaries now around what you're sharing with this person, right? Or how close you're keeping them to the things that are going on in your life by what you tell them or what you bring them into or what you have them involved in or what you invite them into. So this cleansing and clearing, again, you're cleansing and clearing your vessel, like your body, your mind, body, and your spirit. But again, it could also be your physical space to make room for something new to take root for the new year. And this is all going to be tempered by the love and the joy of the holiday season. So as you're wiping the slate clean to tell a different story, it's allowing you this space and the time to write your next chapter. And in that next chapter, as we get closer to the end of the year, it feels like you're going to have to start making some conscious choices to decide which path you're going to go down. This clearing of space internally and maybe even externally is going to bring in new opportunities. But you have to be able to release all the things that have been holding you back so that you can be clear-headed about the choices that you're going to be making come the new year, right? It's this question of, are you going to continue doing more of the same and staying in your comfort zone? Or are you going to courageously move in a new direction? And depending on what you've been clearing out is going to help you determine which of that it is for you, right? You either will have cleared out all you need in order to feel safe where you are, so you can stay where you are, or you might determine that the things that needed to be cleared out are not things that you can control. And so the best thing for you to do is to walk away and forge a new path forward. But you can't make that decision until you let go and bring to a close those things that are commanding your attention over the next couple of weeks. So just a reminder to allow yourself time to play and to have fun. A part of this experience is going to be all about exploring what you want more of in your life and what you want less of in your life. So there may be some experimenting involved to help you gain some clarity. And that's it. So I hope that that was helpful. If you have questions or you want more specific information relative to your life and what you're going through right now, feel free to reach out. You can always book a session with me and we can do a personalized reading for you, or we can do a coaching session. We can do a human design reading. Just let me know. I'm here for you. I hope that helps. I know that that was kind of a little bit all over the place, but I hope that there were enough messages in there that were clear for you and that you have an amazing week ahead. Until next week, everyone, be well. If you're hearing this message, that means you've listened all the way to the end. And for that, I am truly grateful. If you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, would you mind leaving us a review wherever you listen to podcasts and sharing it with others? If you'd like to connect with me for one-on-one coaching or human design reading, you can find me on my website or on social media. Also, if you have a topic you'd like me to discuss on a future episode, please DM me. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Stepping into Meaningful Relationships.